different than had been done before. So when we send data, for example, this year to Mary Ellen Henderson and said, okay, here's your math scores for ESOL. And you look at those math scores and you go, oh my goodness, our ESOL math scores are not where we want them to be. And suddenly there's this overarching concern, and rightfully so. There's some urgency that's there. But what's different this year is that we can pull out in a very quick way, here are the kids. And we have those lists, and when we look at those lists, we know there's 8 kids on that list. And so now we know those 8 kids by name. And so when you ask the question, do we know if we've touched each of those 8 kids? Yes, we can say we've touched each of those 8 kids. Will we ever get there to extend learning opportunities through additional instructional time? We're always going to be able to provide the time. I think the question that I wrestle with is the time utilized in a meaningful way so that we're actually getting at a differentiated approach for each of those kids? Because opportunity is one thing, engagement and depth of understanding is something completely different. And so I think having an opportunity to know each of these kids by name and by need, knowing that relationship that we have with them, knowing how they learn, engaging through collaborative team processes to talk about these students differently, gives us a better opportunity to get to each student in a very timely and tailored way.
Well, that's a great example, and I would urge you to add that to the evidence of progress, because I think that's really pretty astounding. So that's a great answer. Thanks.
Thanks. All right. Thank you. So the next one is 1.3, and this is reviewing updated, formative, and summative student achievement data to inform decisions about instructional practice. And Jeannie Seabridge is here tonight, and we're not going to invite her up at this point. We don't want to put her on the spot. But one of the things that she does for us in an extraordinary way is helps us sort of navigate through the data. There's a syndrome that's in the literature. It's called the DRIP syndrome. It's data-rich, information-poor. And one of the things that school divisions can be is they can be extremely data-rich and not have the information that we need. And one of the things that Jeannie Seabridge and our principals and many others have been able to do is sort of suss out what is the most important information that we can look at within the data sets that we have that will help drive instructional practice. So when we show you, for example, at a work session, the SOL data, that gives us really interesting programmatic data. But now we're beginning to drill down through that formative and summative data at the school site. So we're looking at STAR data, we're looking at DRA data, we're looking at the cohort data from our ESOL students and our special education students. We're looking at, we're using now a tool called Performance Matters that allows us to develop our own benchmarking assessments, our own formative assessments that then feed those benchmark assessments, and we can quickly get information to determine how students are learning in the moment so that we can then make modifications on the fly. I've used this analogy before, but it's somewhat the same, and it's important to think about how are we using formative assessment to drive instruction. And so the analogy that I've shared before is formative assessment is to a physical exam as a summative assessment is to an autopsy. Both of them give you good information, but only one of them you can do anything about. So utilizing Performance Matters and some of these formative assessment platforms allows us to take the temperature, if you will, of our students, make modifications in the moment, and provide them intervention by name and by need so that we can help support them as we move towards those summative assessments that move forward. So when we look at our updated achievement data, that's the data that we're looking at. And so that's a big piece of where we are. Are we there yet? No, we're still yellow. And part of the reason we're yellow is we have a new tool this year that we are using, and that's Performance Matters. And I think it's going to be a really valuable tool for us to help us move ahead. The next is around training all of our professional staff to close achievement gaps with utilizing research-based practices. We're still yellow. We're continuing to look at the literature, we're continuing to look at research, we're continuing to look at evidence bases to see what are those schools that have the highest rate of performance around students who are in those gaps, what are they doing to meet the needs? And so in the yellow off to the right, you'll see some of the things that we're really focusing in on that are research and evidence-based that really make a difference. You'll see up there, for example, effective progress monitoring, and that goes back to that notion of following and monitoring formative assessment of students in a timely way so that we can intervene much more quickly than we might otherwise. So if you think about it as a case of if you're sick, for example, and you go to the doctor, if you're really sick, you got to come back to the doctor every week to get checked up to make sure that you're not getting any worse. If you're not very sick, you don't have to come back very often, but you still need to come back and get an exam to make sure that you're doing okay. Our students that are in the gap aren't sick. That's not what I'm suggesting, but it's an analogy, right? But what I'm saying is our kids that are in the gap need much more attention. And so we need to see them more often, and we need to effectively monitor their progress as they're moving forward so that they don't slip. So 2 weeks don't go by and go, oh, I didn't get to you, I'm sorry. Oh, I see now you're a week and a half behind. So we're going to progress monitor better. We've put together some ESOL and special ed cohorts using data to inform our instruction. As I've mentioned before, one of the things that we have had in place that we're sort of moving away from, and it becomes an efficiency measure also for us, is looking at how we distribute our students across our schools to make sure that they have the best opportunity to work with teachers that are most effective and trained in the work. So rather than assigning 2 ESOL students to one teacher and 2 ESOL students to another and 2 to another, we're beginning to cohort students and really working with those teachers in deep and meaningful ways to provide opportunities for them to work with ESOL kids. Jen Fessenden has done an incredible job working through our math workshop program and differentiation of instruction for math, and then we have the standards-based grading cohorts and best practices around grading that we're looking at as well. The next is 1.4.6. I share this one because it continues to be a yellow and it's maintaining small class sizes. I know that that's something that this board and this community expects of us. The other thing that this community expects of us is to be creative and thoughtful in some of the things that we offer to our students. Even tonight, our speaker said, is there more you can do? And so one of the things that we have tried to do is been responsive to the community around, and our teachers around what they are excited about to teach. So we are offering, and this is the risk, we're offering a very long list of courses, for example, at the high school. And the more courses you offer at the high school with a defined amount of staff, the chances of some of those classes coming in at smaller than what you would expect the class size to be means that those kids that aren't in that class have to go somewhere else. So if you have a class of 15 and you're staffed at 24 to 1, that means 9 kids are somewhere else, and this class isn't serving all 24 that they were staffed for. So we're starting to see some bumps in some of our numbers because we have a very broad curriculum, a broad set of curriculum offerings at our school. So one of the things that we're going to continue to look at and refine is what's the right balance of courses that we're offering, and are there some things that we might be able to offer one year and maybe not the next and alternate years so that we can maintain those class sizes that our community expects of us. The next is around, sorry.
So Dr. Young, with respect to the high school class size issue, could you just talk a little bit about, my understanding is staffing in the high school is done by student load as opposed to class size, and how does that enter into the calculus?
I think you may be alluding to sort of 2 separate issues. One is how are the schools staffed, and the schools are staffed at a ratio of 24 to 1. So Matt Hills, the principal of the high school, gets, based on his number of general education students, X number of teachers divided, and it's that student population divided by 24, and then there's a process. The state also dictates that there are loads that are not to be exceeded. So for example, English language arts teachers at the high school level shouldn't exceed, I think the number is 124. Is that right? I think that's right. 124 students per day a teacher shouldn't see. That, when you take 5 courses at 24, gets you more than 124. So that means that some of those classes need to be smaller. So what we do is we try to balance some of that as well. But the fact that most of our classes are staffed at 24-1, we have some PE classes that exceed that, our band class exceeds that. Some other areas that have more kids allows us to have smaller classes in other places. So it's kind of a both and. All right. The next is around excellent staff. And here it's about improving, we had in our plan, improving advertising and marketing to expand the pool of applicants while prioritizing areas of critical need. We're a green, and part of the reason that we're a green is that we've improved our advertising and our marketing, and we've also developed a process. So one of the things that we are excited about are a number of things, but one is for the first time last year, we offered early contract opportunities for teachers that were in critical need, which meant that we could offer a contract to somebody on site if we went to one of the career fairs. So for example, Amy Hall went to the University of Virginia, Millersville University, Marymount, and even though we weren't in the hiring cycle, let's say it was in March, we gave Amy the authority to offer an early contract to, say, for example, a special education teacher. We can't tell that special education teacher what grade level or what school, but we can guarantee them a position. So that allowed us then to bring in some people earlier than we might normally have been able to do that. So that has improved and expanded our opportunities. We've also discontinued the use of a website called Top School Jobs, and instead we're using something called Handshake, which we're getting better use out of. And we're also posting jobs at James Madison, George Mason, University of Virginia, Bowie State, and others, trying to, again, leverage our great school system and bring people in. And just as one more plug, you know, the Virginia Educators Association last year did their salary study, and the City of Falls Church is one of the highest paid school systems for new teachers. We are #1 in the state for new teachers coming into a school system. So any new teacher out there that is interested in coming to Falls Church, just know if you come here, you're going to be the highest paid teacher in the state. That's, sorry, a little plug. Shameless perhaps, but important. And then overall, we continue to pay our teachers really well. So those are some of the things that we're doing to retain and improve our staffing. The next is to attract, diversify our staff to look more like our composition of our student body. So again, we were a red in FY18, we're a yellow in 19, so we're beginning to become more diverse as a community of teachers and staff, but we have some ways to go. And so again, our Director of Human Resources has tried to get out to universities and tried to be more present at schools that might be non-traditional places to go for teachers. Next is providing consistent and ongoing induction for our new hires. This is something that was yellow before. We met it last year, but now we're even improving this year. We're redesigning our mentor program and really looking at our induction program to make sure that, you know, getting our new teachers here is one thing, but retaining them is another. What we know from the data is that about, the turnover rate within 5 years of new teachers is really high. And so it's important for us to revamp our mentoring program and to make sure that our teachers feel like they have a place and that they have a voice in our school system. And that is something that we're continuing to look at. And then looking at optimal, I'm going to go on to this one, optimal facilities, 3.1.4, continue and improve. I'm sorry. I'm going to go on. Yeah, this was about schools emergency management. We were yellow. We actually might, even now that we know better, have called ourselves red in 2018 when we were utilizing lockdown, because now we know better. So since we know better, we have to do better. And so what we've been working on is working with all of our schools on the first 12 minutes. All of our secondary schools have completed that first 12 minutes training. And this year we're starting with our elementary schools, and about half of the elementary school folks have been trained in the first 12 minutes, and we'll continue to work with the city staff on that as well. And then upgrading all of our facilities to meet the needs of students and community. We're certainly feeling really good about where we are there as we continue the construction process at the new high school.